Hello, it's January 2023, and I've talked about my channel, my efforts, focusing on, for example, the sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, sex trafficking, specifically of vulnerable women in the city of Calgary, the province of Alberta, Canada. The secondary major topic that I really focus on is injustice. Now, I've mentioned many times before, it doesn't matter how my story began with my efforts to expose, for example, the sex trafficking or abuse or extortion of these women. That had turned into police, judicial, and political corruption in the city of Calgary. And that happened when, on, for example, May 4th, 2013, when two former police officers decided to impose some sort of street justice or whatever was running through their minds with regards to the female and the false accusations that surround that. Now, how do I know that? November of 2013, the first former officer, Richard Kinnell, had testified in the redirect, which is now missing in the trial transcripts, that they did what they did to me so I wouldn't do that to anyone else. They did what they did to me, beating me while I was handcuffed, leaving me partly disabled for the rest of my life, so I wouldn't do that to anyone else, which in itself implies whatever false allegations and false narratives that were being said about me. Now, I'm also going to segue for a moment and highlight how the next day, on May 5th, 2013, some police profiler wrote, it's in print and I've showed this in videos, again, this is his mere opinion, that I mimic a pedophile grooming a child, and that there had discredited me with anyone who came across my case that could have helped, thinking, well, this so-called professional is correct, assumed that it's true. How this person would ever come up with that is beyond me. The only thing that I can conclude is this person was listening to other people who had invested interest to discredit me. I've also talked about, on tangents, for example, social justice. Now, how does this tie in with injustice? Because social justice has nothing to do with justice, truth, or anything. Social justice focuses, it plays on people's feelings, their emotions. It's about how people feel. And this social justice mindset has been around for a long time, but has greatly infiltrated for decades, perhaps even hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, into what I would call traditional justice with the courts. Traditional justice, for example, I'm using traditional justice as my descriptive, deals with laws, and laws are supposed to be, and this is another tangent that I've talked about, be applied equally to everyone. And then we get into, for example, case law and everything else, which is supposed to be used to say, hey, here's a case, this was the outcome, to keep it fair, in theory, keep it fair. Now, I've highlighted with the injustice of police, judicial, and political corruption how, for example, if there's an agenda, as my case, to have someone convicted, they will lie, cheat, and steal, but I digress. Really, what I want to focus on here is social justice, and really how it plays with people's emotions. And people adhere to various kinds of social justice movements because of their feelings, usually because they can relate to it, whether it be real or perceived, they can relate to it, and they adhere to social justice. They believe the lies that social justice movements are based on. I've highlighted, for example, feminism. That's a big, huge worldwide social justice movement, and how that has completely, well, it's vilified males, for one thing, and really skewed everything. From that, we have the Me Too movement, believe all women, and all this other nonsense. Now, how do I know about social justice? Well, I've spent many, many, many years, over a decade, researching social justice, and this really began for me in 2013 when I was looking for men's support groups, and there are none. Now, there are some that are run by women, for women, who say they do, but they don't. And I was wondering why. I was also wondering why a mere accusation be so believed and jumped on. An accusation. And then we have busybodies, and what I call glorified busybodies, professionals, so-called professionals, mostly dealing with the liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology, buying into accusations. We see throughout history how accusations burnt people at the stake and everything else. Really, in today's world, we haven't changed. These busybodies, for example, escalate things beyond ridiculous because of feelings. No one cares about what the facts are, or the truth is. And law itself, traditional justice, through the courts and everything else, and I've said this repeatedly, has become like theoretical mathematics, neither of which having a basis in reality. Now, this is not a diss towards anyone in the legal profession at any level. I was part of it once, and I can see the inside, have the inside perspective. And this is what people who have to deal with injustice, this is why they're dealing with injustice. It's all about feelings. And even the people who, for example, call themselves truthers and freedom fighters will believe, and these are forms, another form of social justice, because they have all the same characteristics of the more observable social justice movements. Because one example of how you can tell is the virtue signal. And they only see what they want to see. They see the truth that they want to see. Now, again, I'm not disrespecting anyone on either side. I'm simply highlighting some points here. I've talked a lot about the destructive nature of social justice, and even talked about the difference between equal opportunity versus equal outcome. Social justice wants equal outcome for everyone. I'm generalizing here. When you look at my case, for example, you have busybodies, glorified busybodies, siding with the social justice movement of, for example, an allegation, false allegation, and they acted upon that, and what happened to me clearly demonstrates the emotional connection that these two former officers bought into. And what I find really surprising, kind of, is despite independent evidence, a plethora of independent evidence to say, hey, listen, you guys are wrong. Doesn't matter, because we're still dealing with emotions. Now, we're also dealing with the emotions, for example, when you get on the bad side, the wrong side of, as an example, a prosecutor or even a judge, how their emotions kick in and they have an agenda and they want to do harm, and they need to enforce their social justice because of some perceived hurt feelings by using other people of like mind. And all this is enforced, even social justice now, ultimately with the threat of violence. I've talked about these marches, protests, petitions, and all these things doing nothing throughout history. These are forms of social justice on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's a way for people to vent and feel good about themselves, and they virtue signal. But real people who fight for truth and justice, for example, don't flash around a badge or something or keep talking about it. They find themselves in a situation, directly or indirectly, and they simply do. And they don't need to tell the world or show the world, for example, through virtue signaling, who they are with regards to all that. They're just simply recognized for their efforts. I've highlighted many examples of various kinds of individuals who fall victim, as a descriptive, to injustice. I've recently highlighted Christine Wall, her story, with her kids being taken away once she started to complain to the police even about the sexual abuse of her son. And eventually they took her children away from her and her husband. I've highlighted the story of Daniel Holtzclaw, former police officer, Oklahoma, serving 264 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit. I've highlighted Stephen Avery, who was originally incarcerated for 18 years for a rape he didn't commit, completely exonerated, released from prison, and a few days before his lawsuit for that wrongful conviction that they set him up on, they pinned a murder charge on him and not only put him back into prison, but his mentally handicapped nephew. I've highlighted the injustice of Judge Camp, former Judge Camp, and he's now trying to get permission, I'm not sure if he ever was succeeded, to at least practice law in Alberta. All because he asked a reasonable question when you actually take the time to read the transcripts, that social justice movements took one sentence and totally took it out of context. It's interesting how people who adhere to social justice fit a particular demographic of a political position, like liberals, Democrats, same thing. Now these people can conclude something that is far remote from what was said. Now, I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson at all. However, I do remember when he was going against all this nonsensical proper pronoun use, how people want to identify. And there was one interview with this reporter or whatever, and she asked a question and he answered it, and then she replies, "So what you're saying is," and I remember the look on his face. He was like, "What are you talking about? That has even nothing to do with what the question was or what the discussion was all about." And for years, even to now, you can still find memes about that. So what you're saying is, it's amazing. Social justice, and people talk about democracy. Democracy, 51% of the population can take away the rights of 49%. Contrast that with a republic, where 99% cannot take away the rights of 1%. The people always talking about democracy. So when you look at equality and everything else, and I'm just going to segue for a moment to make a point, and I'm going to reference Christianity and scripture there. Who was it? Which character in the Bible wanted equality? And that would be the enemy of the Most High, or God. Call him Satan, Lucifer, whatever. And I'm not going to get into that in too much detail, but that's really the origins of social justice and liberalism, democracy, and all these things. Because weak people need to band together, have the majority to get what they want, equal outcome, or perceived equal outcome, and there's no such thing. We're not all equal. So tying all this back, going back around to injustice, what we see is a solid foundation of injustice being social justice, and how traditional law, courts, traditional justice has adopted social justice so much. And I've said before that even the most conservative types of people have been infected with liberalism, this whole social justice nonsense. And what we see, a huge rise in injustice because of this. And that's really what I just want to highlight. Again, I'm not saying anything bad or negative about any group or person or authorities or anything like that. I'm just simply highlighting some points which, if you step back as a third party, you start to see how and why things are the way they are in the world. And I'm just going to conclude by saying, even over the past several years, with everything that has been going on all around the world, that was the biggest social justice movement that we've known of, because it's impacted everyone and it's caused a division. And we even hear, for example, where Lenin in the former Soviet Union divided the people. For example, the poor peasants and the rich peasants, using social justice, emotions, and the atrocities that came from that. And look what happened to that nation during that time. And there's no one that is not impacted in one way or another, directly or indirectly, by injustice. Anyway, just things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.